name is Gavin Neate, and a little bit about me before I introduce you to my esteemed panel. Is anybody going to complain that we're all gentlemen? Do we need a lady up here? Anyone know a bit about housing? Okay, brilliant. Come on, we need to even it up a little bit. Anyway, we're going to be talking about housing. We'll talk about some of the challenges around housing, and we're going to be talking about some of the really... Excellent, it's a round of applause. You can start a Mexican wave. Excellent. Right, so housing can be a very dry subject, but people who need housing, it is not a dry subject. People who go through the torture of trying to find housing, it is not a dry subject. Potentially at the end of the day it could be a dry subject, but it's not going to be on this panel, not with this group of people here. But before I go into this, I want to introduce myself and why I am a non-disabled middle-aged white guy is up here as a host of this panel. So a little bit about me before I hand you over. 1996 I joined Guide Dogs for the Blind after 10 years in the military police, and I became a guide dog mobility instructor. My job was training blind people how to use guide dogs. From that moment in 1996 I became very excited about equality, inclusion, diversity, equity of opportunity and choice. And when it came to housing, I saw a couple of things happening in my life that made me just go, why? There's no joined up thinking. So one very quick example. I had a gentleman who I trained with a guide dog, and he had diabetes and he had to go into hospital. His left leg was removed. I then trained his guide dog how to be able to get him from A to B, adapting to the fact that he was now walking slower, had a limp, and he was hoping to get a prosthesis. We never got that far, sadly. However, they found him a house, and they said, oh, we've got this amazing house. They even put in a £10,000 ramp for him. They made sure the house was fully accessible. It was a super house, and it was at the top of a hill. So the joined up thinking was not there. So when it came to him trying to then get his fitness back again, considering he'd just lost a leg, there was no way he was going to do that. So he was pretty much marooned in this house on top of the hill. And I saw that repeatedly. So I was seeing with my clients all the time people having massive challenges. Now, I've spoken to the gentleman on the they said jury there. It's not a jury. It's not court. And Asa was telling us a second ago that he's not an expert. And I said, Asa, have you ever had a challenge with housing? And Asa said, yes, I have. I said, that makes you an expert. That also makes you a mentor. It means that when somebody else talks to you, you've got advice that you can pass on to somebody else. Okay, so I pretty much guarantee that anybody in this room could be on this panel talking about their personal experience with housing, but hopefully we're going to learn a little bit more here. Now please do excuse me as I refer to my notes, which are on my phone. But first of all, we're going to pass across, and I'm going to be quite strict here because we are up against it with time. Carl, who I met, I don't know, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I'm going to say he's new to this business, but is exceptional in his experience. Carl, if you could give me a 2-minute introduction, that would be really useful. Just pausing for a second. If you're not wearing headphones and you're finding it hard to hear us, then please grab a set of headphones. There are extra ones. Okay, over to you, Carl.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Good afternoon, everyone. First visit here, quite impressed so far. So my name is Carl Nandoo, and I run a company called Neate Care. And the Neate Care started in 2020, and the reason why it started is due to me being a carer for my mother and my father. My mother has rheumatoid arthritis, and she has dementia. My father, he fell and was in Radcliffe Hospital in a coma for 3 months and in a wheelchair for 5 years. They lived in Milton Keynes and I lived in London. So as you can imagine, it's a long bloody journey and it's a nightmare when you want to get there. So what am I going to do? I'm going to have to move them. So I moved them twice, found a property, sourced it. And what I found was sourcing property was a challenge, and in a sense, Neate Care was born. So to choose a house for your mother or your father is quite challenging, let alone yourself. And to move them from one place to another in a community is also quite challenging. And the world of adaptation came in. from a bungalow to a property, adapted property, and then realising that what support and help was there. And in a nutshell, I become a bit more of an expert in home improvements and care. So amenity care for me is about home improvements, estate planning, you name it, all around specifying, right down to occupational therapy, right down to care, because at the end of the day, you'd best to stay in your home, ideally, than to go in a care home, and that's what I do.
Brilliant, perfectly timed. Thank you very much indeed. Nick, you are a bit of a stunt double for your colleague. It's brilliant to have you here. Could you maybe just explain a little bit about Habentag and indeed who you are?
Absolutely, happy to do that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Bungay. I'm the Director of Housing and Assets at Habentag Housing Association. I don't know how many of you today here have heard about Habentag, but we're an organisation that builds and develops accessible homes. But when we were set up 50 years ago, we could understand that Habentag itself couldn't build the number of homes required for disabled people across the country. So the one really important piece of work that we're doing is campaigning to influence national and local government policies. That's an important driver for us, and I'm kind of keen to say a bit more about that today, because last year the government actually changed the building regulations, so we're moving in the right direction, but as ever it's too slow, and I think we need as many people as possible to kind of help Habentag bang that drum as loudly as possible, so we can make sure that every home that's built in this country is accessible and adaptable to the needs of disabled people. So excited to be here today, looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome, truly. I like statements. Oh, Asa, over to you.
I don't want to hold it too close. My name's Asa Ems. I also work for Habentag. More specifically, I work for their sister organisation, CAE, the Centre for Accessible Environments, and we've been around since 1969, and we were sort of absolved into Habentag to be partners in about 2015. My specific role is I manage the ASAS service. It's a bit confusing because the name's done the same as my name, but that stands for the Accessibility and Sustainability Advisory Service, and I essentially help charitable organisations get the funding to complete access audits and design appraisals, and that's basically my day-to-day job, and I also do a lot of other things. So yeah.
Asa said to me a second ago, he said, I'm not sure I'm very experienced in this area. I think he's got a lot to say. This next gentleman here, who, if you don't know him, ex-military, you can tell, ex-military, side parting, sort of, he looks a bit smarter than me. Were you an officer?
No,
neither of us are
I
officers.
work for a living.
Over to you, Nick.
Hi everyone, my name's Nick Wilson, middle-aged white male with a bit of a George Clooney look with a greying beard going on.
Yeah.
Very, very suave, I'd like to say. And I'm here through purely lived experience. I'm currently in a flat which is inaccessible. I've got spinal injury which has declined a lot, and I'm a semi-user of a wheelchair, but my power wheelchair has to live in my wheelchair accessible vehicle outside because I can't get it indoors. I'm now got priority rating or whatever it is with the council, but the council can only offer me a hotel currently, and the situation basically is my landlord also now needs to sell my home, and he needs me out, well, he needs me out by July. So currently I'm facing homelessness any time really. So the frustration of trying to get a place, I've been living it literally for the past few months.
So we might as well go straight into the first question, and we're gonna keep the microphone and then just head it back the way again. Nick's alluded there to a situation that he's living with right now, and the question that I've kind of got for the panel is the main barriers to making sure that you've got the right kind of housing, and it makes perfect sense to stick with Nick just now. So Nick, the main barriers, what are the biggest barriers that you've had to overcome, indeed if you are overcoming them, to actually getting the right kind of housing?
Yes, what I found is that you've got, when you ask the question to the government and you make a point, they will only talk about purchasing a house. They'll only talk about new homes and how they've got the new classification of M2, M3, whatever it is. but they don't then say anything about private rental. And I found that the private rental area is the biggest problem area for me. So the issues that I found is that when I'm searching for a private house, a private place, on the likes of Rightmove and Zoopla, there's no specific filters, and I'm speaking to Rightmove at the moment, and they've said, well, yeah, 2 years ago they asked all estate agents to write within their write-up and use certain words which can then be searched for specific words. Estate agents basically didn't do any of this, so you can't search for it because they don't put it in the write-ups, and there's no filter search either. So by the time I've found some properties that potentially look like they could be suitable for me, but like if it's a flat in a block of flats, it won't even tell you if there's a lift, let alone if there's any steps. And by the time I've inquired about it, filled in all their forms, where now actually they pretty much want you to book a viewing straight away before you've even done anything, and then they come across your form and then they go, oh, you're in a wheelchair, there's something suitable for you. So I found that probably, honestly, 90% of the properties that I search for that I think are going to be right turn out not to be all right, and then I've just searched for God knows how many properties, wasted all that time and still not got anywhere.
And that sounds like it's totally avoidable if only at the very start somebody goes, oh, right, okay, we know what this person's needs are.
Correct. If estate agents need to be more aware and write better articles when it comes to them adverts when they pitch, when they put them, and to be thinking about this. Rightmove and Zoopla actually now need to step up and make the filters in there, so which would then actually force the estate agents to write anything within it, and that doesn't even then come into the place of the council and how long it takes them to then come back to you. It's almost against you from the get-go, really.
I'm actually personally really keen now to find out if there are any particular housing company estate agents that are ahead of everybody else. So I'm kind of wanting to see if the panel know of anybody that's doing like Purple Bricks or whoever it might be, or Rightmove, who's doing the best job, and if anybody's had a really great experience. Asa, just with your own experience so far, either your personal experience or through the employment, where have you had the greatest challenge?
I think for me, it's knowing where to begin in the first place. So I have cerebral palsy. I live with my parents, and my house isn't as adapted as I would like it to be. And I would like to move out into my own place soon, but I honestly just don't know where to begin. And I think that in itself is a problem, because there should be a better way of promoting what's available, or things like that. And also, speaking from experience with a lot of my friends, they had similar issues with estate agents, because estate agents don't understand the nature of what people with different disabilities actually require. But I've had many frustrating conversations to explain that just because I may have the same disability as somebody else doesn't mean that we have the same needs. It's not a one shoe sort of fits all kind of thing. So because estate agents don't understand that, one of my friends actually, it's what Nick was saying earlier, how the description of the property seems like, oh, this seems like it could be accessible, and then you go there and it's not accessible, and you've wasted your time because you booked a viewing for it, and it goes back to the fact that you have to book a viewing and everything like that. So yeah, I'd say that's the biggest challenge.
It's a starting point.
But yeah, they definitely need to improve promotion, because I know nothing. I don't know where to begin.
So instantly I'm thinking that we need more people employed to disable people, subject matter experts
with at least lived experience.
Yeah, 100%.
Because they're just very detached from
Nick, is this
reality.
something that you've found? Have you found that there are anybody out there who's with lived experience in any organisations?
Yeah, and again, I think Asa and Nick's points are spot on, and we're actually doing a piece of work where we've brought a group of disabled people together to help develop an online tool called Accessible Now.
That's good.
So it's very early days, but given Habenteg are quite familiar to others in the housing sector, we brought together a group of housing associations to look at what properties they've got on their books that are accessible and to almost trial putting those on this Accessible Now site. So take a look at our website, habenteg.org.uk, and there's a section there about that project. As I say, still early days, but we're hopeful that the more people we can get interested, the more likely it is we can avoid the kinds of problems we're hearing about from Asa and Nick. And I've heard that myself when people turn up, they look at a property and it's not accessible. Ideally, you'd want all of the information there at your fingertips, a video, some simple icons, some descriptions about the bathroom and level access, for example. It would make everyone's lives a lot easier.
So approach Nick later, because it sounds like he's asking for help from you to join the group so that you can actually give him some good feedback. Carl, you've gone through this seriously with your parents and having to deal with it firsthand on behalf of somebody else. What has been your biggest challenge in actually delivering for them?
What's been my biggest challenge? The local authority, waiting times, different people, being run around the houses, literally pun, and people not realising or appreciating the urgency and the focus around making it simple. They make it too complicated. So what I will say to you is, I help people when it comes down to getting a grant. There is £30,000, if people don't know it, to adapt their home. Whether you are renting or whether you are buying, there's a grant available. The key is following through the process and understanding the process and going for it. The second thing really is to, I would probably say, is to start shopping, because £30,000 is there for you to spend. They will give you a specification. As long as you meet it, it's okay. And that's what I help. So I have OT that will help with it. So what I do is I try and speed the process up. To get your home adapted, it will probably take about at least a year to 18 months potentially. Small adaptations, very simply, they can get it done in about 4 weeks. But when it's big adaptations, you want it now. So what I would say is most people get confused and worried about taking on the local authority and taking on the project. Don't. If you need help and assistance and support, that's what I do. Speed the process up and make sure that you have a high and accessible home that doesn't look like a hospital bathroom and looks like a high 5-star hotel, and have choice.
It does sound like Carl's got like £270,000 in his pocket just waiting to help you.
What I will say is another keynote, sorry. So there's now about £120 million available this year on top of the... So there's about £600 million to improve people's homes. If your home ain't accessible, how can you access everything outside of your home?
So I think Carl's going to be very busy. Anybody going to see Carl later? I think I might. Yeah, brilliant, excellent. Right, okay, at least one person. So the next question was around finance. Carl, obviously there is finance available. If we can work our way back again, because you've sort of answered that. Nick, is there an awareness of how people can actually access this finance, other than me just pointing at Carl and going, Carl's going to solve all the problems?
Yeah, I think it's certainly an area we'll often talk to our tenants about, and it can be quite complicated kind of navigating the kind of routes for a disabled facilities grant, but I think I was absolutely right. That should be the first port of call for people to contact their local authority OT and to find out about that OT assessment to make sure that an application can be made via the DFG. But I think another point I'd be keen to make, and it's often something people aren't aware of, but anyone is a tenant for a housing association. Housing associations also tend to have a pot of money so that they can make a contribution towards adaptations for the home. And typically that can be anything from £1,000 up to £2,500. So again, that's something I'd suggest as well. I think in the private sector, I think that can be a bit more of a challenge, as I think we heard from Nick earlier. But certainly DFG is step one, and certainly if anyone's aware of anyone as a tenant for a housing association, then please, you ought to speak to that association and make sure you can access some of those funds as well.
Brilliant. Asa, have you found that you've actually been able to locate any of this hidden cash? Have you been able is it just lying under your bed?
No,
anywhere?
I wish. I think everyone wishes. The only sort of grant I was available, that I was aware was available, was the one we've just discussed, which again speaks to my point of how do people find out where this stuff is? Like, if it's not promoted that this stuff is available, people don't use it. But yeah, so that's just.
Yeah.
You know, I can scream that to the rooftops and hope the right people listen. But yeah, so
Thank you.
that's the only grant I know of, which goes to show.
So sometimes Nick's already got an answer in his head, but being ex-forces, you generally find your way around things, and I'm fairly certain being forceful can be quite useful and not taking no for an answer, which is probably where we're going, Nick, I guess.
Don't know what you mean. Yeah, I mean, for me, the cost, Christ, it started straight from the dot where I didn't even know about Habentag. You know, if you're newly disabled or you're coming into this, there's no rule book that tells you all these things, and my council didn't even tell me about places that I could go. So I didn't even know about that. And now the problems are, I'm not even looking at a grant to make any changes because I haven't even got a roof over my head. So at the moment, where the costings to try and find the right place is anywhere about £1,000, £1,200 a month, and you get £550 housing benefit, even my maths can work out that doesn't quite work out. So, you know, what I have found is some of the councils, they have a certain funding for in emergencies to house people. Now they can use that funding to help you meet the cost of the rent, because it's better for them to pay you an extra £100 a month to top up, opposed to then having to pay £100 a day to put you in hotel accommodations. So I've only just found that out. But yeah, I mean, even pestering, it's gone up to MP, it's gone to the papers, it was on LinkedIn. I mean, that on LinkedIn just showed how many people are getting frustrated with this, because it had 90,000 impressions. So this is a massive area, and I just think a lot of people are even struggling just to even get a roof over it, let alone making the adaptations.
Yeah, I've seen that with several people online, and I think you mentioned there about being online. It's the most amazing resource. If you are on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram and these sorts of areas, there are so many other people who have either been through it or are just about to go through something you've gone through, and you can use them as a resource. They might be able to point you in the right direction. If you connected with any of the guys that are on the panel here, they've got information for you, but you have to be proactive sometimes. So I'm kind of keen to find out how we feel the authorities could improve. And that's a big question, but in a very as short a way as we possibly can, because you've got another question to go through. How could they do better? What could we do either to help them do better, or what could they blooming well do better themselves?
So we know that financially we're skinned as a country, the government's skinned, get that, but even basics such as maybe having an advocacy service within the council, so someone like me, for example, they can have, right, okay, well, we'll get John to come round and see you then, he will know all about Habentag, the places you can go, etc. That doesn't cost any money, it's something they can do immediately. They could be reaching out into the Habentag and all the rest of it, so even just a basic advocacy type service to help you point in the right direction and join some dots up, then that would help massively, opposed to just feeling you're totally on your own, and then it suddenly seems extremely overwhelming, impacts your mental health. You then start getting, you know, in a deep dark place where I was, and you then struggle to even look for properties. Something like that can be easily done very quickly.
And that the spiral, and Nick's alluding there, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning, because obviously you mentioned it, but the spiral of depression around housing is a nightmare until you will just spiral down, and you need support, you need help, you need somebody else to point you in the right direction. And I know you've handed the microphone along, but what was it that helped you get to that stage where you could then find yourself coming out of that feeling of I'm not getting anywhere?
I'm still there.
Are you finding that you're getting help from
No.
authorities or people? Is it friends? Is it?
For me, everything that I've learned so far is LinkedIn. And you might not be a LinkedIn person, and you might think it's only if you're a business and all this, that, and the other. It's worth getting on it and get yourself a profile just to search for the people on this panel here, if not other else. Like I say, newly physically disabled 2 years ago, and the support I have got from the disabled community has been massive. I've got more through LinkedIn, that's where we met, and so many friends here today has been through LinkedIn. So even not from a business, honestly, it's a free resource. Get on there.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just by show of hands, how many people are on LinkedIn? How many people have got a LinkedIn profile? Wow. You need to talk to each other if you're not already out there, because together you have the most amazing hive mind of information about how to actually change things. We're talking about how we can help them change, but we can lead by example and prove it's possible to change without them, and then we'll drag them along with us in so many ways. Asa, have you got any top tips on what you think they could be doing? And you're leading.
I think the change in regulations last year is a great step, but from the perspective of someone who's a wheelchair user, there was literally sort of no conversation, or very little conversation, about category 3 homes, which are homes designed specifically for wheelchair users. And I think that's not good enough. I think that us at Habintech are trying to push for more dialogue to start about that, because for me to be a functioning member of society and feel included, I need to have a completely accessible home. It's my independence, and also it's so much more than just where you live. It's linked to your mental health and things like that. You know, there's a stat from some research that we conducted, and it was that someone who lives, a wheelchair user who lives in an accessible home is 4 times more likely to be employed. And that is because if you've got your own space, you feel comfortable, your whole mood shifts. So it's so much more. So I would like to see a bit more information and out there about category 3 homes. That's what I would like to see.
What a remarkable stat, by the way. What a remarkable stat. How important. Nick, yeah, go on. Give us
Thanks, Gavin. Ace is absolutely right. It's a really important link, isn't it, to people's quality of life, independence, and their accessible housing needs. Habintech actually conducted a Freedom of Information request a few months ago, and we found that there are 20,000 disabled people waiting on local authority waiting lists to find an accessible home. So I think from our point of view, and Asa made a similar point, we need to make sure that when it comes to local authorities' housing policies, accessible housing is built into their local plans. And again, in the same Freedom of Information request, we found that half of local authorities didn't have anything in their local plan about the proportion of homes they were going to build to that accessible standard. So I think from our point of view, we're not going to move forward until local authorities are building more accessible and adaptable homes. I think that's a really important point for us, as well as campaigning nationally to make sure that every home is built to the minimum standard, the accessible and adaptable baseline. So I think quite a lot of this terminology and building regulations, when I first came across it, feels quite kind of dry and quite kind of focused around maybe if you're a professional in the area, you understand it. But for me, it's simply about having a home that disabled people can use adequately, and until we do that at a national and local level, it's going to be hard to move forward. So that's something that we're really fighting as hard as we can for.
That's brilliant. Carl, you are a perfect example of what happens when a vacuum exists. Your entrepreneurial streak, when I'm not actually finding ways to solve this, I'm going to solve it myself. And I think a lot of people here will appreciate that it's get up and go that gets things done. So in starting it yourself, have you managed to find that that's actually been the best way forward for you and your parents?
100% yes. I think the reason being is my background is very much around wireless technology and IT and its solutions. So the key is, if there's a problem, there's a solution. The question is, who's going to solve it? If you go and find someone, you're going to find the problem with maybe their solution. But the key is having them on your side. So for me, it's about having people that are professional in what they do, bridging the gap, and yes, so they are leading on the local authority to speed up the process, and they're going to have to find a way to do it. And the two now are having to work closer together to bridge the gap. So it's our money, and we now need to be able to say what needs to be done to it, and you need to stand strong and unite together and out the people that are making it difficult for you, because they're accountable. And that's what I found, is to be passionate about it, but to show that you're able to support, and also to help people in the community realise they're not on their own, because we sit here and we think we're our own. And the last thing I will say is that when it comes to home improvements and funding, it can drive you nuts. Just making a phone call to the local authority stresses you out when you can't speak to no one. And I've now gone into mental health because of all of the stress, but also to understand what mental health challenges people have. So the local and the NHS from the community need to understand about training and the people in the community around diversity and all of the things that we find around racism at work. Sorry, I'm going to go off pit here. Racism at work, and finding people that look like me, talk like me, and actually want to help me. When you get that, you've got your support network. And this is also about the individual stepping out of their comfort zone. Because it's very easy to look and see what's going wrong. You have to lean in if you want to change it.
Brilliant. Before you pass that back again, I feel like rounds of applause every time when somebody says something. It's pretty cool. You don't have to, it's okay. We can do one big one at the end. So I just want to... I'm always wanting people to tell me who's doing a good job, because ultimately it's great when we can say they've done a bad job, but I'm going to ask each one of our panellists if they could just promote somebody or an organisation that's done a brilliant job for them. Somebody, it could be a member of their family, it could be an organisation, it could be a member of the community. Have you found that there's somebody out there that's done an amazing job and you've felt they've been really positive for you?
I'll tell you what I found. LinkedIn is the key. I'm sat here because of LinkedIn. I'm sat here because I've met a great mate of mine called Isaac Harvey. I'm sat here because he's introduced me to Gavin. He's introduced me to Nick. I'm now sat here amongst all of you. So what I will say is the greatest platform for me right now is having a voice and using that platform to link up with other people like-minded. I've got a story to tell and supporting them.
Wow.
That wasn't a link. I don't get paid by LinkedIn, to be honest. It's helped me.
Who doesn't have a LinkedIn account that now thinks they need to have a LinkedIn account? Okay, there's at least 4 or 5 people, maybe 6 people there who are now going to be doing something. So, Nick, who's done a brilliant job, other than Asa, obviously?
Absolutely. Well, obviously Asa. I think from quite a lot of housing associations' point of view, and I'm speaking from Haventek's perspective, I think often it's our staff members on the front line who are perhaps doing that job of kind of bringing agencies together. And I think that's something that kind of we hear time and time again through people that call our helpline. Often when you're talking to housing people as well as OTs, as well as other agencies, I think often it's the frontline staff members that can really kind of pull those people together and act as someone's advocate. So I think for me, it's those neighbourhood coordinators and it's those frontline staff that can really help bring agencies together to help people find that accessible home.
And when they do, and you feel they've done a good job, make sure they get a pat on the back. Just give them a bit of a pat on the back and say, well done, thanks very much, because they don't get paid much, and they're probably working because they love doing what they do and want to do a good job.
Absolutely. And there's just one other group, Gavin, if I could mention that. We've got a group, I mentioned them earlier, called the Insight Group at Haventek. So a group of disabled people that we're working closely with to actually lobby and campaign for change. And I'm pleased that James Lee, one of our Insight Group members, is with us here in the audience today. So I'd encourage everyone to get onto the Haventek website, join the Insight Group. We have meetings every few months virtually. And as a result of that group, we've been able to meet parliamentarians, we've met government ministers, and that's something that we're really passionate about, making sure we're bringing together decision makers and disabled people to actually come to the kinds of solutions and get those changes to policy that we want to see. So again, Insight Group, a big plug today as well.
Brilliant, brilliant. Asa, who's gone over and above for you? Who's been instrumental?
I think it's an interesting point because with social media, there's obviously a lot of negatives and everybody knows what they are. But without the extensive community of people that are like me that I've built, it's really good to have people that you can discuss your struggles with, because it's easy to feel like you're by yourself, but you don't need to keep your struggles in your head, because there's a whole bunch of people out there that are going through exactly the same thing you are, and they probably need someone to speak to as well. So if anyone wants to add me on social media, shameless plug, I know, my DMs are open and we can talk about anything. Also, shout out to Habintech. It's really good to partner with an organisation that kind of shares our values, because every home they have is to an accessible standard, whether that be category 2 or 3, but also they understand that it's about the individual, the people. That's the most important thing. Everybody has different needs and they want to be integrated into society. They want to feel like included. So yeah, and also my mum's a legend.
Everyone's mum's a legend. That's brilliant. Nick, who is out there doing it for you right now?
Oh, there's so many people doing it for me right now. In a non-sexual way, that sounded really bad. Apologies. So I was. Well, you said you didn't want it to be a dry subject.
It's not.
So,
Brilliant.
Yeah.
End of the day.
So I would say, there's a couple, to be honest. Veteran Community Network. There's I don't know if there's veterans here, but if you know anyone who has got veterans, that really helps. I'll say one that's different to everyone else. There is the LinkedIn, I'm going to say again, because it has massively helped. What helped me, I'm still quite early on in my journey with this, I suppose, but I actually reached out to my mental health community team and my trauma team, and when I said to them that I was really struggling with the situation, then basically my trauma therapist, counsellor, my GP, they all got together and made the council attend a meeting and then said, you need to sort this out for his mental health. Now, that can be a really difficult one sometimes because of pride, or maybe you don't like to ask, etc. I get it. 14 years in the army, trust me, I'm a proud male. But the point is, when you ask and when you can actually get over that point and say, this is impacting my mental health, you have to sort this out. And if you get the support from health professionals, it does help. Because if they then don't do anything and a health professional has warned them, it's going to come down on them like a ton of bricks. Suddenly, I had the main manager from housing attend a meeting and she wouldn't even respond to an email prior to that. So it might be difficult, but it's, when you're in a desperate situation, you've got to use whatever you can.
Absolutely awesome. We're going to sort of wrap up in a couple of minutes' time, or a few minutes' time. So we'll have time for a couple of questions, but that's really just so that we can sort of get chatting here. I think we all know that if you've got questions, these guys are out there, and indeed the people are sitting around you. They're out there to actually help you with so many of the things that are out there. We don't have to answer the questions today. Connect with each other to do it. I'm going to finish just by thanking my amazing panel. If you want to unlock that box of cash underneath your bed, Carl is probably quite a good person to talk to. If you want to improve your network and actually get involved in an organisation that is there to help you, then get in touch with Habintag. If you want to follow someone on social media who I think is going to get bigger and bigger and do amazing things, I'd be following Asa, because how eloquent is he? Pretty impressive. And if you want to follow somebody, and I know this from a personal point of view, if you want to follow somebody who's going to motivate you and inspire you, then I'd follow Nick, and I know that personally. Just get in touch and involved with these people. So a round of applause for my amazing panel who have been brilliant. Thank you. We do have a couple of minutes for some questions, so I'm going to be saying whoever puts their hand in the air the fastest. Wait a second. You were the fastest because I asked you right at the start and you were right in there. Can I borrow the microphone? I can't get staff. If you could just introduce yourself very quickly and then pose our question, that'd be brilliant.
Can you hear me?
We've got you.
Yeah. So you said about things such as estate agents, Zoopla, and all things like that. And I think that would be really important because currently sorting out my house up north, and when speaking to estate agents, they didn't mention anything about disabilities and things like that. And if they did, for a specific house, that was what people who own houses sort out and do, because certain houses would be perfect for someone who would be,
I totally get it. I'm going to answer this one really quickly because I think I know what the guys would say here is be proactive at the start. Ask the questions as much as you possibly can so that you're being proactive with them. Don't wait for them to get it right. But I'm going to go back very quickly to the start there where I asked the question, is there an estate agent out there that is doing a better job than anybody else? So just one word from each of our guys if they know of an estate agent. Does anybody know of an estate agent that's doing a brilliant job? Okay, it's out to the audience. Anybody know of a estate agent that's doing a really good job? It's roving. This guy can do this.
Hi. There's one that comes to mind, except I've temporarily forgotten their name, and it was about access to the process as well as getting the equipment installed for someone who is a deaf hearing aid user. So obviously part of the situation, but doesn't relate to wheelchairs and some of those issues. But I can certainly look that up and share it. But I agree that they need to be encouraged and kind of almost like. But it's very difficult. This is a comment, not a question, isn't it? But what was difficult with all the other estate agents in that area, and even with them to begin with, was you're already at the back of the queue by the time you've tried to get a response. And especially if you can't ring up and get past the fact that they go, well, you need to ring and you need to do it now. So obviously there's impediments to ringing sometimes. Yes, you can live chat it, whatever. But there's those barriers before you can even have the conversation about getting on the list. And those properties have already gone. And that can only be even worse for something where the adaptations are more complicated. So that needs to be written into the bill that's currently being thought about at the moment, doesn't it? It needs to be residential landlord associations encouraging the landlords to actually understand that there is money. And that I was at a residential landlords meeting earlier in the week, and like this panel and its cousins need to somehow be embedded in those kinds of discussions, because it isn't always lack of money, it's lack of joined up anything, isn't it? So that's my question / comment.
I can't pick a question. Has anybody got an answer to that?
What do you think of that then?
That was brilliant. That's a perfect question. What do you think of that then? Over to you, Carl.
I'll answer the question for you. There's a couple of things. So property, as we all know, is easy to make adaptable. You just need to have someone to do it for a start. But the second thing, and it goes back to what Gavin said, if you know what you need, you outline the criteria of what you need. Don't expect them to know because they don't have a clue. Yeah, but I think once you profile that, it makes it easier. There are some companies out there sourcing property. So there are a couple that I know, and they will provide you with the prescribed service that you're looking for, and they will do the Q&A, and they will probably provide the scheduling appointments, because it can also be hard work as well. Yeah, so I think generally speaking, on that basis, it's going to grow. It's going to grow.
Okay, I've got one. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, Carl. We're still to find that perfect estate agent. My future panel member. Could you help? Thank you. Got it. If you could let us know who you are as well, then I can. That's in my brain for the next time we do it.
So I'm
Ta-da.
I think in answer to your question, who is the best estate agent out there? I know that we don't sell property as disabled individuals, but we are people who are going trawling through those properties and trying to find them. Recently, my lift broke down to my upper floor flat, and I couldn't stay there, and it was beyond economic repair. So I've trawled through the whole of right move. I can't even get into the estate agents in my high street, which is just around the corner. So I picked up the keys to and is able to vet some of these properties and jump on them. But I'm in a position of privilege because I can interpret floor plans and I can look at those things and see what information I need to look at. There was an advert on Facebook recently where someone had moved into a house that when they went to view it, they realised it had a hoist upstairs and a lift, a through-floor lift, and they were asking if anyone wanted to buy it from them because they didn't know that their property was going to have that. And I'm thinking, if that had been advertised properly to someone who needed it, that could not hidden away in the background of the photos as I've seen. So keep fighting, basically, to people who are trawling through those things. You will find a property eventually, but we need to join together and actually estate agents.
With a carrot. That's with a carrot. I found that's really useful. Carry a big carrot. I'm going to sum up, because there's not really any more questions for the panel here. I'm going to sum up by saying this is about networking. And if you don't feel confident having these conversations, there is somebody sitting next to you right now who is more confident than you in some areas and has more knowledge, and certainly on this panel. And if you ask them, they can give you a little bit more of that energy that you need to ask those questions. And even if that's writing it down and having it there, then it's going to help you. And I'll sum it up by network, communicate, because you've all got the power right here within this group of people to actually solve the problems. Thank you, panel. You've been bloody awesome, and you're still awake. My pleasure. Please come and talk to the guys if anybody wants to connect, and you should be connecting on LinkedIn, obviously.